The new Titleist SM8 VOKEY wedge is out and it looks unbelievable, but then it also has an unbelievable price tag to go with it at £160 on their website, 180 with a graphite shaft. So if you were going to buy an old SM7 or SM6 wedge, what do you need to know? Let's have a look. Get in the hole. Guys, how you doing? Welcome back to a brand new video. It's Simon down here at Burford Golf Club. SM6 and SM7 VOKEY wedges. This is my guide to how to buy a second-hand wedge, whether it's Mizuno, Cleveland, Strixon, whatever. This is my guide to buy the right wedge for you without getting fitted for it. It was the closest you can possibly guess, because let's be honest, the new wedges that have come out, they look lovely. They're not going to be any better than the SM7, but you're going to be able to get fitted for it, which is the important bit. And I'd always emphasize getting fitted for the lower end of the bag rather than the high end of the bag, because that's where we spend the majority of our game. However, if you don't want to spend £160 on a new wedge, which I can understand, here's my guide, here's my tips. What is a bounce, what is a grind? Because now you could pretty much get an SM7 brand new for 90 quid, SM6 for 70, and obviously second hand, depending on the condition, 40, 50 and below. So let's go through all of it. Let's go into the sim. I explain all that you need to know when it comes to buying a second-hand wedge. If you wouldn't mind leaving this video a like, subscribing if you are new, that would be ideal. It's not raining. Perfect. Right, let's go. I have to apologise because I haven't updated the community page with all the winners from last week's giveaway. Haven't picked them yet. I'm going to do that tonight and post all the results and then message the people individually. So sorry for how long it's obviously taken. But this week it's going to be exciting. I've got some great items and golf clubs to obviously review and give away to you guys. So if you don't want to miss those videos, then turn the notifications on, which is the little bell. And obviously subscribe if you haven't already done so. Let's get into it. Two wedges, 3 shots with each. I'm just going to hit a full wedge shot. We can see the distance, we can see the spin, and then I'm going to talk to you about why bounce does not matter indoors off a mat, as well as what grinds you might particularly need if you're a certain type of player, and then also gapping. Gapping is so important when it comes down to wedges, because you need to have an array of different yardages from about 100 yards all the way down to 30 yards and pretty much have control over all those shots. That's how you're going to get your handicap down. If you're struggling in the 20s at the moment and you want to get down to 8, this is where you should be spending your time. Hey, SM6 first. I'm going to alternate 3 shots with each between these 2 wedges. I'm about 95 yards from the flag. And let's just have a look at the spin rate and everything else in between. Now I'm going to say I'm not the worst wedge player in the world. However, it's very difficult for me to gauge any difference between these two. Trying to find differences between one wedge to another year after year is near on impossible, and if anyone says they can, they're probably lying. Now that's spinning at 9.8. Loft is probably the most important thing when it comes down to spin rate. Forget what's on the face or how many grooves, etc, etc. If you've got loft at impact, that ball is going to spin, and if you don't get any spin, it's because you're not compressing the ball. I.e. you probably come over the top, you leave that club face massively open, you hit it massively out the toe, ball goes up in the air with no spin, comes down, and if you struggle to hit these wedges, it's because you're not coming through on a good line. You're not getting your hand slightly ahead of the golf ball, and you're not making a small divot. And I'll get into that in a minute. Now this is obviously the SM7 now, so let's hit exactly the same shot. And that's a tiny bit thin. It's probably going to be pretty much the same distance. So, what I do want to get into is gapping. Gapping is probably one of the most important things when it comes down to wedges, because irons now are so strong lofted and so cavity backed and so forgiving and high launching, etc, etc. You have a pitching wedge and then you have like a 52 and your pitching wedge does 120 or let's say 100, and then your 52 doesn't even get anywhere near 70. And this is the important bit. This is why knowing which wedge to have in your bag is going to be vital. Otherwise you're just leaving yourself too much work, and you're trying to hit your 52 so hard that you never get it anywhere near the flag. And when you do, it spins massively backwards. Right, another one. What I want to tell you guys when it comes down to bounce and grind is, oh, could you imagine a whole one of these? That'd be ideal. It depends where, and I'll go into more of this in a minute, it depends where you play. So for example, England, you want tons of bounce, and you want quite thick grind, so the club basically glides along it rather than digging into it. And obviously when you're on a mat, it doesn't really matter what grind or bounce, because it's always going to glide with like a soft cushion underneath it. Could be good. Could be good. Now all of these shots are spinning at 10,000, and the reason that I can do that is because I practice my wedge play a lot. Doesn't matter if you buy a £160 wedge or a £20 wedge, if your technique is not up there, i.e. if you're not practicing your wedge play 4 hours a week, you're not going to see a blind bit of difference. And it was one of the hardest lessons I learned when playing this game. Just practicing wedge play, enjoying practicing wedge play is the most important thing you can do. That's got to go. That could be bunker. Again, between these two wedges, if you masked them over and I couldn't see which one's which, won't be able to tell you the difference. Now obviously they're slightly different grinds, they've both got slightly different bounces, but off the face, and pretty much if I was to hit the SM8 as well, they both feel good, they both sound good. The grooves are in good condition as well, which is important to know at the end of the day, because that's where you're going to get a tiny bit more spin, especially when it's wet and thick. Get in the hole. Not too shabby. Right, let's get into it. Okay, tip number one is gapping correctly. I always suggest going stronger in lofts at the lower end of the bag. This is why. Majority of people think their pitching wedge in their bag is at 48 degrees, which just isn't the case. A lot of clubs now, especially if you've got something slightly more cavity back, it's going to be at 46, potentially 45, plus with a big chunky head, you're going to hit it a considerable distance. As soon as you get one of these in the hands, no cavity back, quite a lot of spin, i.e. that's what they keep saying in the marketing, so much spin, so much spin. That spin is the bit that's going to stall it in the air. Too many times I see someone here pitching wedge 120 yards and then they get the 52 out because they think 4 degrees difference between my wedge and my 52, and they can't even get it past 80. I had 2 pitching wedges in my bag for a long time. I had a 48 degree VOKEY and I had my normal pitching wedge, and I hit my 48 degree VOKEY 110 yards and I hit my normal pitching wedge 130. So I highly recommend at least you go and try a wedge of some description to get some kind of yardage gapping for your swing, and don't be afraid to get a strong lofted wedge like a 48 degree, because at the end of the day, if it does the yardage, then that's the more important factor. Bounce. What is a bounce? Basically, bounce is to stop 2 shots, the thin and the fat. When you're at a golf course that's incredibly wet, i.e. England, you want something with a lot of bounce, because it's going to hit the ground and glide along the ground, especially if you have quite a steep swing. The idea is if you're coming down like this onto the golf ball, the bounce is going to help hit the ground and then move it forward, not hit the ground, catch the ground and then dig straight into it, i.e. the fat. The other rare circumstance is that if you're in a very hot country like Texas, or well, I know Texas isn't a country, but if you're in a very warm place with quite firm ground, then obviously you're going to need 0 bounce, because if you have a lot of bounce and you hit something off a cart path, it's going to hit, bounce off, and then you're going to thin the middle of the ball. Bounce is there to design or to stop 2 shots. And to be honest, for 80% of golfers, you should go more bounce when you can, not less. To be honest, most manufacturers, when they've designed a 50 degree wedge, for example, they're going to put less bounce on it. When they're putting a 60 degree wedge, which is going to be used in sand, i.e. soft ground, they're going to put a lot of bounce on it. So you're never going to be too far away from it, but that's what you need to know if you want to understand what bounce is. What are grinds? Grinds are designed for different shots around the green. So for example, I have an M grind wedge here. So this is designed for a player that doesn't necessarily put the ball further forward in their stance, but actually puts it somewhere in the middle and opens their club face so they can hit a lob shot. they take off the bounce, or they grind off the bounce here, so that club can sit nicely when you open the club face up. The other grinds for the other wedges, again, for different shot shaping, and that's down to you. Now, if you're not practicing your wedge play, or you're not practicing a lob shot or a flop shot, these grinds don't necessarily make much difference to yourself. So you're looking at very niche, very advanced wedge players that are actually going to benefit anything from this. Again, as I said with the bounce, the majority of manufacturers will only put a particular grind into a particular loft for a particular shot. So again, when it comes down to wedges, you want to make sure you're getting the right loft most of all. And then if you do want to care about what grind you have, think about how you're playing particular high lob shots or pitch shots or bump and runs, and that's how you're going to find out which grind is best for you. Shafts a very interesting one, because someone said to me once, Dustin Johnson swings his wedge exactly the same as you do in terms of club head speed from a 50-yard pitch shot, because if he swung it any faster, it's not going to go 50 yards. That's why the majority of wedges just have a wedge flex. Now, you can go and get custom built wedge or shafts into wedges, but to be perfectly honest, if you're trying to design a wedge that's got exactly the same shaft as the rest of your set, then I'm guaranteeing you're trying to hit full shots, which I don't recommend when it comes down to wedges. So yes, you can tailor your wedge shafts, but to be honest, just stick with whatever it comes with. How good condition should the face be? Now, the idea behind a wedge face is to reduce the amount of dirt and water there is between the face and the ball at impact. So making sure that you've obviously got half decent grooves and they're not all meshed together is going to help in wet, rough conditions, for example. Apart from that, I don't see there much difference. I use a dry, rusty wedge in here and still spin it at 10, 11,000 RPM. Grooves, milled grooves, the marketing grooves that they all put into there are designed for wet, rough conditions, and still trying to get that spin at the chip shots or the pitch shots around the green. However, as long as the face isn't worn or the grooves aren't meshed together, when it comes down to condition, it's more aesthetics than anything else. And obviously you're going to get more life out of a groove or a club that hasn't been hit 1,000 times. And so I'd kind of stay away from the ones that obviously been hit 10,000 times, and you spend 20 quid more to get one that's in a better condition, just as it's going to A, last longer, and B, you're going to get more out of it in those more testing conditions. So guys, there you have it. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you did like this video, leave it a like. As always, please subscribe if you are new. Catch you guys later.